Hey guys, welcome back to the garage. You missed a little bit of the filming because God knows where our trusty cameraman Bill ran off to, but we did talk about doing the fuel cell, however, also relocating the battery and shifting the nitrous bottle over a little bit. So the ultimate plan was to get the fuel tank, the factory fuel tank, basically sat under the vehicle over here, which created several problems. Problem number one was if we needed to get to that fuel pump, which we did have some fuel issues, as you can see in the other videos, if we needed to get that fuel pump for some reason, it was almost impossible. You got to drop the rear cradle to get the fuel tank out. They've got to come out together, or at least the cradle's got to be out of the way to get the fuel tank down. The secondary goal was to shift some of the weight a little bit further back and shift the weight balance. The weight balance on the Ute wasn't horrible. It's 53-47, but if we can get it a little bit, more biased towards the rear in terms of the fuel, the weight from the fuel, the battery, which used to live right directly behind the driver's seat, and also getting to that battery or changing anything in the battery compartment was next to impossible. So we were able to get, we found this really nice billet aluminum battery hold down tray. The guys at Nitrous Outlet, same bottle bracket that we had before, but the guys at Nitrous Outlet hooked us up with the bottle bracket, so that's going to live here. We now have the fuel cell in place. It's just past the rear wheels, so we're achieving that goal of shifting everything backwards. We've got the fuel pump mounted up underneath, so it's going to be an external. We decided to go with Aeromotive's 3.5 GPM pump, brushless. That is also a TVS or true variable speed pump. We're really looking forward to that. So the way that this is going to work, we're going to have a 12 AN fuel line feeding the pre-filter, and then a 12 AN line feeding the fuel pump. 12 AN line coming out of the fuel pump going into the secondary filter, and then a 10 AN coming out of that secondary filter going up to what's going to be a Y, and then we're going to feed both fuel rails individually with an 8 AN line with an 8 AN return line coming back to the tank. So we have our rollover valve installed. This is our vent line. So this is the rollover valve to keep the fuel from, in the event that I actually flip this thing. I don't think that that's likely, but in the event that I flip this will keep fuel from splashing out. This is going to be our return line, and we'll go ahead and get this up in the air and show you what we did underneath as well. With the vehicle up in the air, you see what we did. Here's our sump. And yes, we are aware that the sump is on the side, and Dave over at Nitrous Outlet was kind enough to point that out to us. However, with the way the cross braces run, I don't think, and also needing to mount the pump back here and everything else, we had some concerns about not being able to shift the weight further back. So long and short of it is, this is where the sump needed to go. So what we'll do is we'll just make sure that we've got plenty of fuel in there when we do drag race this, so that when the vehicle shifts all the weight to the rear, we don't run the pump dry. So ultimately we've got our 12 AN line coming out here. This is a 100 micron filter going into the 3.5 Aeromotive 3.5 brushless gear pump, and then our pre-filter, we've got the filter bracket on the way, didn't come in yet, and then we're feeding this 10 AN line. Basically, we're going to come up here. This will Y at some point, and then we also have the Aeromotive high flow flex fuel sensor. So we've got, let me see, we're going to take the Continental sensor that was in the Ute to begin with, that was attached to the factory fuel tank. We'll use that for our flex fuel sensor, so we can tell exactly what our ethanol percentage is. So that ultimately will this line will come off. We'll have that high flow 10 mil in there. This will get mounted roughly about here, and then this Y will come up, and it'll Y right here. Will go on either side of the emergency brake cables, and then we're going to feed these lines. Oops. You may or may not be able to see through that. Let's see.
I'll get some B-roll of it and put a light behind it.
Yeah, so this thing is so restrictive. Obviously, this is the way it was plumbed in from the factory. But when you look through this, you know, when you see the actual sensor element inside, it's so restricted. This may have been a big part of why we were having fuel issues to begin with. The way the air motive bypasses this, so basically there'll be a quick disconnect type fitting on each end of this, but then you also have a 10 AN line that's going to allow the fuel to flow through unrestricted into our double -8 lines. And these will run up. We're going to keep these up inside the transmission tunnel, up out of the way of the exhaust, and also above the drive shaft. We're going to run that all the way up, and then we'll terminate these lines on the firewall, and then we'll tie in a shorter line that will connect directly to the fuel rail. That should give us all of the fuel that we need to do what we need to do. We're also going to we're putting in fuel injection clinic 1440 injectors, replacing the ID 1050 injectors that we had. So at this point, fuel cells in, batteries done. We need to bring those battery cables. We're going to keep the little cubby hole where the battery was, and we'll get some B-roll of that, but the little cubby hole where the battery was had connections, had like a separate connection that fed the rest of the car forward. So what we're going to do is install bulkhead fittings there that we can tie into, just leave the rest of the wiring for the positive and negative side of the battery running forward like it was. So got a couple bulkhead fittings coming, but for all intents and purposes, the battery relocation is done. We just have to feed the wires back up to the cabin. Next, we're going to start pulling the engine and transmission. We need to get this 4L80 in place, get the TR6060 out of the way, and then we're also looking for a place to mount the Dominator ECU. This is the factory ECU that we've taken out. And we thought maybe there might be enough space to kind of sneak the Dominator ECU in there, and we're essentially double the size of the factory ECU. So it's not going to live where this one did, which means we need to find somewhere to put it. Even though it's fully potted, we still, if possible, we still like to keep that in the cabin away from the heat and everything else in the engine bay. We'll also make connecting to the data link a little bit easier. So once we get to that point, then we can start looking inside for places where we can mount this. We need to get the Holley harness fitted to the engine, because at the end of the day, that's going to tell us how far and you know, how far away we can actually mount that ECU. As you can tell in the other videos that we did, once we got to the track, the launch was so violent with the manual transmission, and there was no adjustment to that clutch. It was kind of like an on-off switch, and there was no kind of slip adjustment like they have on some of the performance clutches out there. To save some of the drivetrain parts, we decided to put an automatic in it. It'll make the car a little bit faster as well. You know, hands down, the automatic transmissions are just faster than the manual. So we decided to go with a 4L80. We got this unit built by Hughes. This is Hughes Performance. This is a model, is a 25-3BX D1 manual valve body. So in the drive position, we should be able to have full electronic control with the Dominator, but then we still have the ability to do manual shift. This should give us the ability to be competitive out on the track, although this car is never going to win any races. It should, you know, in certain classes, we should at least be able to be competitive. Most importantly, we should be able to launch this thing this time, fingers crossed, without destroying brand new ring and pinions. So now that we have this in, we can also turn this powertrain assembly back around, get it in place, start routing our fuel lines. That way we can figure out exactly where that's going to mount up on the fuel rail, and then we should be able to make some really good progress here soon. Stay tuned, good stuff to come.